Hi guys, welcome back to the Forgetful Scholar. This week we're gonna talk about one book. One book that sent me spiraling into a reading slump. So, yeah, not too happy about it. So, we're gonna talk about Where Dreams Begin. It is a Lisa Kleypas novel. Okay, so, and this is an older one of her books. This was published 2000. So it's 24 years old. Okay. And if you've been here for a bit, you know I like to read sometimes the older novels of some of the authors that I like. I just like to see like the growth, you know, sort of like the creative process and see how, you know, they've improved and things like that. And boy, howdy, can I see where she improved later on, right? So I know I give Lisa Kleypas a lot of shit on this channel. I will say that for the majority of her books, I do like. I love the Hathaway series. It's some of my favorite romance series. I really like the Revenal series too. I very much enjoy how she pairs in the 1800s, how she pairs like aristocrats with the industrialists. So the old people who have maybe titles but no money, and then like the self-made individuals that have money but no title. Like, it's an interesting time period that she focuses on, and I enjoy it. You know, sometimes you don't want to read about like a duke and the daughter of a viscount. You know, sometimes it's fun to read, you know, a daughter of an American industrialist and a duke, or, you know, a viscount's daughter and an industrious, you know what I mean? So, oh, this book, because I've read worse romance novels, because I kind of wanted to give it a 1, right? But I have read worse ones, just because I was bored, you know, I couldn't really give it a 1. So I gave it a 2. That's better, right? Okay, bye guys. No, so you can very much tell the beginnings of certain series ideas and personalities that she puts later in a book. So this follows Zachary, who was a self-made industrialist, and Holly, who is a widow and a single mother of a little girl named Rose. And she's Lady Holly, you know, so she's an aristocrat. She's from the upper echelon of British society, right? Now, I'm going to be comparing this book a lot to, what was it? It was the Revenal and Wallflower book where like those two series collided. Evie and Sebastian's, The Devil's Daughter? Is that what it's called? Devil's Daughter, not the Devil's Daughter. Okay. I'm going to be comparing it a lot because a lot of tropes, not tropes, but like story points overlap. Yes, she has other widow stories finding love a second time. I think the Revenal book, like the first one, the hero, the first female lead in the Revenal series, she was a widow, but it was very different circumstances, right? Because she was terrified of, when the book starts, she was terrified of, oh, dog scratches at the road, great. When the first Revenal book starts, the widow was terrified of the husband that died. So a very different dynamic, right? The Devil's Daughter, Phoebe, yes, loved her husband who passed away. So I think that's why even internally, I was comparing the two quite a bit. Yes, When Dreams Begin came out in the 2000s, and Devil's Daughter was like, I have it all written down. I don't know why I'm like trying to remember off the top of my head. 2019. So you could definitely see the growth, you know, because I think Devil's Daughter, I really liked that book. I liked it a lot. So, you know what I mean? You could see how much better she got at this. So, let's start off. Okay, so we start the book. Holly is in the year 3 of her mourning. So her husband died 3 years ago of typhoid. Very sad. It was a love match. They have an adorable little daughter named Rose, who, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6. Like, she's young, but they don't specifically say. Her dead husband, George, was around when Rose was little. So I don't know how old Rose is, but she is a little treat. She's so cute, right? George. He's 3 years dead when the story starts. I'm probably going to sound like an insensitive bee right now, but they're fake people, so it's okay. He was mentioned so much in this book that he might as well have not been dead. Like, I know more about George, the dead guy, than I know about Lady Holly. And she's the main female. Are you kidding me? You know? So that annoyed the shit out of me. And like, I will say, Lisa Kleypas, it wasn't that Holly annoyed me, right? Because I think Lisa Kleypas is very good at making individual women very fascinating, unique, right? Hell, the first Wallflower book, I think her name's Annabelle, couldn't stand her. But she had a personality that I couldn't stand, right? It wasn't that she didn't have a personality, right? When I read a Lisa Kleypas book, for the most part, I know who the woman is. Sometimes the men seem to be like copy-paste, but the women on the whole are not, right? I will give credit where credit is due, right? And I said it before, there's a lot of books where I'm bored, then annoyed, and then absolutely fall in love with the book in the Lisa Kleypas literary universe, right? I will say that. So I was kind of hoping Holly would show a little more personality, right? I think the biggest gripe I had with Holly is that she didn't seem to have a personality outside of being the widow. You know what I mean? Like, everybody in the book, except the main character, his name is Zachary, and his family, everybody else was like George's widow. And with Rose, oh, my brother's daughter. Like, no one kind of gave them agency, and I think that was done on purpose. Because no matter how much I complain about Lisa Kleypas, she knows her craft, right? She knows how to write. She knows how to spin a yarn. You know what I'm saying? So that was on purpose. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that was on purpose. And I love that because I was like, ooh. So we're going to see Holly kind of gain her own identity. Because for her, in her POV, she mentioned George like all the damn time. I think I counted on like one, you know, the book was open and the 2 pages facing me. I think in those 2 pages, in her POV alone, she mentioned George 5 times. Like, that's a lot. Like, every time we're in her POV, George this, George that. And, like, I get it, grief and everything, I understand. But, like, it was a little too much. Like, she hung on to George's ghost a little too long, right? So, the book itself is 373 pages, right? It wasn't till page 295 she finally starts to let go of the memory of George so she could be happy again. And I'm like, that's like 80%, no, like 90% of the story is done, right? Right now, it should be like the conclusion of the 3rd act, you know, starting on the happily ever after kind of aspect. Like, this was too long, you know, to the point where like, we didn't really see Holly falling in love with Zachary, right? And there was a lot of opportunities. I really enjoyed Zachary's character. I mean, I definitely see shades of like Simon from the first Wallflower book in Zachary. I think Simon is both a little more fleshed out in some areas and less so in others. Like, I'll explain later. But I enjoyed him. You know, I kind of see where a lot of Lisa Kleypas's heroes later on come from him. You know what I mean? And if you're ever interested in like the rules of the 1980s, 1930, 1800s, sorry. Brain is like gone today. 1800s, like England society. This is a really interesting reference book because it's like a gender reversal of My Fair Lady. So Zachary hires Holly to teach him and his little sister and his mom society's etiquette. You know, so I did enjoy that. That was a lot of fun. And of course, me being the nerdy nerd that I am, fact check to make sure those were correct for certain sources. And yeah, I'm like, oh, cool, cool. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Go her. So, basically, Lady Holly is a very respectable lady, right? They met at a ball. So they met at a ball, a little misunderstanding. He ends up kissing her in the corner. This is going to be a lot of spoilers because this came out 24 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And even though I give spoilers to a lot of my stories, I still encourage you guys to read them because it's, even if they are a little spoilery, the journey to read the book is so much fun, right? On a general scale. This one bored me to tears, but you know, maybe not you. So like, he's like, oh, who is she? He finds out who she is, and then he invites her to her house and he proposes, hey, teach me and my family how to be like stuffy snobs, and I'll pay you a lot of money. Like a ridiculous amount of money. Like in that time, like, I can only imagine it probably like, I can't say the exact equivalent, but like I would imagine it'll be like almost like $1 million our time, right? Now this is the only, no, this is one of 3 decisions she makes for herself in the entire book. So let's put that there, right? And I was like, I guess that would have made sense if she was a shy person, but she wasn't really a shy person. She had no problem arguing back with Zachary. She had no problem correcting him in a lot of areas. So like, she didn't come off as shy. She didn't really come off as too sheltered either. Like, she did come off very rule abiding, but at the same time, not because she took the job on, like, basically being their tutor and moved in with him. Rose and her moved in with him, right? So that was a little weird. Also, her dead husband's brothers, assholes. Complete assholes. And I know that was probably like the average guy at the time, but man, did like, because when she said, hey, I'm going to tutor Zachary, his mother's there, his sister's there. Like, it wasn't scandalous really. Like, if no one else was there and she was by herself, I could see that. But the mother is a acceptable chaperone, right? She's taking Rose and they're going to do that because at the end of it, she's going to have so much money that she could live off 1/3 of it and give the rest to Rose when she gets older. Because you have to remember, she's a titled woman in the 1800s that's widowed. And when we open up, she's living with her dead husband's family. Like, she has no income. She has no safety net. She has no home. You know, it's scary, right? So doing this gives her agency and to the point where she can be independent and provide for her daughter. Like, I was like, cool, that's a good decision, right? And I was kind of expecting that we would see someone learning how to stand on their own 2 feet again, you know, stuff like that. But what we got is a woman that kept elevating and like making her dead husband like this perfect paragon that no one will ever reach. Like, it was nauseating, right? And I was like, are they going to bring George back from the dead and that's the romance? Like, what is happening? So they move into the house, and I think Lisa Kleypas did a wonderful job in showing us the 2 sides of Zachary, right? He is this stops at nothing to get what he wants industrialist that started from dirt nothing, right? But he also is a doting, loving older brother and a doting, loving son. And it was done really well, right? Because it wasn't out of character for him. You know, it didn't seem like a switch was flipped and he was a completely different person with his family. He was still him. He was still rough. He was still gruff. He was still overbearing. But, like, you could see how much he adored his family. And you could also see with the interactions with Rose how sweet he is, you know? Like, he played tea party with Rose. Like, first day he met her, you know what I mean? He, at one point, he gets into a boxing match with an aristocrat that is basically slut-shaming Holly, right? He beats the living shit out of him and takes a button because Rose collects buttons. So he gives it to Rose. Like, it's very cute. Like, even in the middle of being angry and, you know, upset that people are talking about Holly, he still thinks about Rose. Like, she's not, I liked how Rose wasn't a second thought for him. You know what I mean? He seemed to adore Rose all on her own, which was really super cute, right? And I thought, oh, obviously she's going to see him being super adorable with Rose and fall in love. I thought, but like it doesn't really go to that part. Like it doesn't really get to that part. You know what I mean? Because like, and they kind of described him as this huge, overly muscular man, like playing teacups with a tiny little 6-year-old who looks like a porcelain doll. Like, I was like, oh my God, that's so cute. You know what I mean? Because Zachary, dirt poor, the family dirt poor, right? He worked in the docks and then he became a pugilist, a boxer in like ring fights where he would take the purse, and then he did that enough for like 2 years to invest in a steamboat, and then he did that and then put that like, so he's like a business genius, right? But he's rough and gruff, and he's not like, you know, not like the wealthy lazy asses that just live off of their generational wealth that is dwindling, but still act like they're in charge. You can tell I'm such an American because, you know what I mean? I'm like, fuck that, good job, you know? So that was going on, right? So that's kind of the premise, and I thought Holly would fall in love with him because he obviously is a very sweet, caring guy underneath all the muscles, I guess. But no, she kept thinking about George. And like, in the beginning, she's like, oh, George was unusually obsessed with his daughter in that time period, meaning he would go and check on her once or twice a day when usually there would be really no contact. The males really didn't talk to the kids because that was the woman's domain, right? Gross. And then, you know, here's Zachary taking time out of his day to play tea party, to play dolls with her, you know, to get her buttons for her little button collection. Takes time to talk to her and see like a little person, you know? And I thought, oh, see, you're gonna compare. But no, she compared Zachary's attitude towards Rose and compared how George's brothers never even checked on Rose. True, a-holes, but also, you know, George never played with Rose either. So I was like, oh, why didn't that comparison come up? Like, didn't have to vilify the deceased husband, but at least start kind of taking that halo and making him more who he was, right? Like in Devil's Daughter, she's also a widow, 2 young boys. She loved her husband, right? And the love interest, Wes, used to bully her husband that died when they were in school together. So I think it's like the first quarter of the book and then a little bit in the middle, she's still like angry at him for her husband's sake and still like feels guilty about feeling things for Wes. But then it starts being about Wes and Phoebe and the kids and, you know, how her husband would have wanted what's best for her sons and her happiness. You know what I mean? So that was a really great pace. This one, not so much, because 90% of the book, George this, George that, George perfect, George whatever, right? And then they started throwing in like these weird roadblocks for them. And I was like, I think her obsession with her dead husband and using him as like a shield for her not to fall in love again is enough. You don't have to add in that the mother didn't think they would, like Zachary's mother did not think they were a good match, which was weird. Because she likes Holly. So I just thought that was weird. And it was kind of shoehorned in there to add a weird speed bump where they didn't need one. I think her still mourning her first husband was enough because we haven't gotten any kind of, she didn't even chip away at her grief, you know? And this is like 90% of the book, right? And then like her dead husband's best friend shows up and like, she tried to make it like a big twist. That on George's deathbed, he extracted a promise from those two, to marry so Holly would be safe. The twist was not twisting. It was not a surprise. The moment she said like, oh, George made me promise, and Zachary's like, promise what? She's like, oh no, I can't speak of it. And then Raven Hill, not Ravenel, but Raven Hill showed up, which I thought was kind of funny, right? Because like, if you don't know, later on she has a whole series of the Ravenel family. So Raven Hill, you know what I mean? Like you could see shades of what comes later, right? And I was like, oh, obviously. So like that thing didn't need to be there because again, she was still like, oh, I have to do what George wants. And through this whole book, she's like, what would George want? What would George say? Like, I mean, I get it, right? it's the 1800s. She's a sheltered little aristocrat. But I wanted to shake her because she's a single mom that has no prospects in that time. She couldn't get a job. That's not allowed. It's like, you need to start standing on your own 2 feet. And I thought that's what this book was going to be about. It wasn't. It wasn't. To the point where she moves back in with her George's brothers, which I felt like was such a slide backwards. Like, it was weird. And then she lets Ravenhill court her. And then she's like, eventually, randomly, Lizzie, who is Zachary's sister, who I love. And I really kind of hoped there would be a book of hers, but her romance kind of happens during this book, so I was a little disappointed because she's a lot of fun. Shows up and begs Holly to come back because Zach is being basically a beast, right? Because he's mourning a love that he'll never have. You know, he misses Holly, he misses little Miss Rose. Like, it's very cute. But since he doesn't know, he's never had anything fail before, like, he's going through that, right? And then she's like, oh, well, I do want to go. Because, like, a page before that, she realizes she does love him. And I'm like, where? Like, tell me where. This whole dang book, it was George this, George that, George this, George that. And then every once in a while it was like, well, Zachary's hot. George this, George that. Oh, look how sweet Zachary is to Rose. George this, George that. I was like, excuse me. I get that you think he's hot, but love? When did that happen? When did it happen? Please tell me. And I think this is a problem with her earlier works because there's part of it, at least we didn't get a scene where Zachary sleeps with other women. It's just sort of mentioned in the background when she first moves there. And he does it because he likes to make her jealous. It's weird. And Lisa Kleypas does that in her older books. I'm happy she moved out of that because yuck. It's the part I hate most about those books, right? It just cheapens the romance that's supposed to happen, right? But also, because she was so wrapped up in George, you know, the fact that she fell in love with Zachary completely didn't happen. Like, when did it happen? Did it happen off the page? I know she's hot for him. Fair enough, girly, but what else, you know? And there's so many opportunities. How he's dotes on his mother, how he's protective of his sister, how he adores little Miss Rose, how he's a really good employer. Like, the thing is, because they went into a lot of detail how Zachary feels, because, like, he was the lowest of the low. So he feels that, like, workers that are paid well and treated well will be happy, work better, you know, and happy to come to work and are more loyal. You know, like, common sense now, but back then, no. You know what I mean? Like, basically, factories were sweatshops. Okay? So, and people, and his investors like, oh, that's ridiculous. And then the other ones are like, no, he makes us plenty of money. Let's just do what he wants. Like, he is, during the book, he's trying to petition a law to get passed that a work day can only consist of 10 hours, you know, for his workers. And he donates a lot to charity, anonymously, because he is a very controversial figure and he doesn't want the charities overshadowed by him, you know what I mean? So he does all these wonderful things for people. His staff aren't really polished and don't know what to do, but he's a good master to them, you know what I mean? Like, he's a good boss to them. Meanwhile, George just seems like a typical lazy, living off generational wealth, middle child, didn't really have a responsibility at all kind of guy. And I'm like, George doesn't sound all that great to me. You know what I mean? And it is until after she finally marries him and she starts getting into charity work that she realizes, hey, you know, there's a lot to Zachary and wonderful. And then finally she comes down with typhoid herself. Fine, full circle, sure, whatever. She fights it, but she has a conversation with Ghost George and she finally lets him go. This is after they've been married. This is like second or third page to the end of the book. Are you kidding me? It's just, oh my God, like, just therapy, please. This is ridiculous. Like, it was just like, I was just like, I didn't like Holly because no personality except the widow. And the fact that she didn't let her first husband go and not like stop loving him, but stop comparing everything to him until after she talked to his ghost or hallucinated talking to his ghost, whatever, when she was on her near death, towards the end of the book, you know? And I'm like, but you're already married to Zachary. You said that you loved him. Like, what is going on? So it was just, the pacing was weird, and the morning went on way too long for me. I get it, and you can't say I don't know what mourning is. I have lost so many loved ones. I know what mourning is. You know what I mean? And I get it. But I think that this is a romance book. This isn't real life. You know, this is supposed to be an escape. And I think Devil's Daughter is a great example of pacing when something like this kind of thing comes up in a romance. The pacing was completely off. Did I see shades of how much better she gets at it? Yes. And later on, her industrialist, she doesn't get into as much detail as she did Zachary. I think this book could have ended 50 pages sooner. I don't think it needed to be this big. And I think the mourning, or the comparing Zachary to George, or internally always asking George what she should do, should have stopped maybe the first quarter, or maybe I could even be okay with it being half of the book, but not until page 295. That's ridiculous. In a 373 page book. That is absolutely ridiculous. That's less than 100 pages. We should be moving on to the happy ending by then. There should, you know what I mean? Like, that was completely ridiculous. So that was my week. I finished this book on Tuesday. Could not pick up another book all week. So thanks for reading. Well, just perfect. Love those reading slumps, let me tell ya. Maybe I shouldn't have read it. I don't know. But it's been sitting on my TBR for a crazy long time. And I was like, let's just do it. You know, it sounded interesting when I picked it up. I love earlier works to see how they grow. The only thing worse than hating a romance book is thinking it's boring. Because at least if you hate it, it engages with you at some level, right? Some level of your mind, it engages. Like, the book I hate least of Lisa Kleypas' literary universe is the first Wallflower book. I hate it. But at least I feel something for it, right? This one was boring as shit. And it shouldn't have been, you know? I kept reading. I enjoyed the scenes with him and Rose. Him being, like, an adorable, huge, like, I just pictured, like, this big, I don't know why I pictured Jason Statham in my head, but I did, holding a tiny little porcelain teapot. You know, it was cute. I liked Lizzie. I liked the mom. So, like, I was more interested in the secondary characters and how they interact with Zachary than I was Holly. And that shouldn't be how it is. You know what I mean? Like, I should be rooting for Holly. I should be rooting for Zachary. At some point, I'm like, dude, you'll find someone better. I should not have thought that reading this romance novel, but here we are. So you can definitely see the bumps in the road, I guess, for Lisa Kleypas. Like, her style, like, learning her pacing, because this pacing was completely out of nowhere. She's like, I love him. I was like, do you? Where? And I find myself asking that a lot with her earlier works. You do love him? How? You're attracted. You want to get on that D. That's fine. That's pretty clear. But love? Hey, where? So I find myself asking that a lot with her earlier works. And it just makes me appreciate her, the Revenals, the Hathaways, so much more. You know what I mean? Anyway, I guess I'm like, what book am I going to read next? I have no idea because I don't feel like reading anything. So thanks for that. I don't want to, but it's time for me to get back to the real world. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.